Hello again, guys. I come at you again today, unfortunately not with Linux news, but with another device review, or at least a quick look at it. This is the Samsung Galaxy Note 3 from Verizon Wireless. The Galaxy Note 3, if you're not familiar with it, is a beast of a flagship of a device. It's a 5.7-inch 1080p display, quad-core 2.3 GHz processor. If I remember correctly, it's the Snapdragon 800, 3 GB of RAM, 32 GB of built-in storage, although 64 GB is also an option. 13 megapixel rear-facing camera capable of up to 4K video recording. Front-facing 2 megapixel camera, 1080p video recording. Both of them have image stabilization built in, a 3200 milliamp hour battery, and a micro SD card slot, just in case you don't have enough storage space. And on top of that, because it is a Galaxy Note device, it has the S Pen, if that's a thing that you're into. And in all honesty, the review portion of this is going to be kind of quick. It's fast. It's a flagship. It'll do everything that you throw at it. It has a ridiculously large battery so that it will last forever and ever. In my testing, honestly, the battery life in this was slightly less than in the Galaxy Note 2. I was able to get about a day and a half's worth of usage out of it. If I really let it go and didn't do anything with it, I could get about three and a half days out of it, but that's not really touching it at all. So that was kind of interesting to see, but realistically, if you're making it over a day, you're doing pretty good. As far as making and receiving calls, as I've said about most of the devices I've tried recently, sounded fine, wasn't really any issues with it. The speaker on the device is down here at the bottom, and it's not the best. It's a little teeny tiny thing, and of course little teeny tiny speaker means little teeny tiny sound. As far as extra weird little features on the device, you've got here on the bottom USB 3 connectivity. That's not something you see on the grand majority of mobile devices, and I'm assuming that has a lot to do with the idea that you can do 4K video out of the back, so the video files get pretty big pretty fast. Now that said, you can still use a traditional USB cable along with it. The USB 3 is designed in such a way that it does work backwards compatible, which also means you can use the same chargers that you've been using up to this point, but the device does come with a USB 3 cable. It's also got this weird little IR blaster on the top. I'm seeing more and more devices with that, and honestly, I am a huge fan of that. Honestly, I think I like the IR blaster on this a little bit more than I like the one on the HTC One. And moving back to sort of the review portion of things, everyday usage on this, it was fine. It was extremely fast. Everything I threw at it just flew by. The benchmarks for it, of course, I read somewhere the benchmarks were kind of fabricated on these, that they were inflated artificially, but I think that's kind of to be expected with most benchmarks at this point, but needless to say, the benchmarks on this were just completely off the chart. And the screen was giant and beautiful. I mean, it's a huge 1080p display. So that's wonderful, especially when browsing the web. That was the first comment that a lot of people had whenever they looked at this device was, wow, it's so easy to read the text. And realistically, that's because you're viewing the same 1080p screen that you'll see on a smaller device like the HTC One or the Galaxy S4, I believe, has that as well. And you're taking that same resolution and putting it on a much larger display, so of course all the text is going to look better. But at the same time, it all flows very smoothly, the transitions are very nice, there's no stuttering, there's no, page having to take the time to fill in, aside from dealing with network lag if there is any. And honestly, it's about the epitome of the perfect phone if the phone you're looking for is a 5.7-inch monster of a phone with a pen sticking out of the bottom of it. Now the pen, it does fit in there very nicely, and it fits in either way. That's a nice touch. But honestly, the size for me was just a bit of a downer. It fits in a pocket. I can definitely get this in my jeans pocket, although with my newer jeans that are tighter and smaller, it's a little bit, it's a lot more difficult to do. It does still fit. It's kind of uncomfortable to sit with this in a pocket, so be prepared to place it on a table or in the dash of your car or anything like that. And in all honesty, I never really got the entire S Pen concept, the whole, things popping up on the screen to say you can do this and you can draw a square on the screen and make an application show up there. It just wasn't really my thing, but I do know it does appeal to a lot of people. Realistically, if I'm going to be doing something on the screen with a pen, I would want to be drawing, and that's about it. And it's a small enough screen that I'm not going to have a whole lot of success with that. And honestly, taking notes with this S Pen, I tried doing some of the handwriting recognition stuff, and my coworker was one of the ones that pointed this out to me. He tried doing handwriting recognition, and immediately the keyboard locked up and crashed hard. And every time I tried it, it would crash hard. So maybe it's the software on this, maybe it's the device, I don't know. Hopefully you guys are having better luck with it if you have your hands on the device, but handwriting recognition did not work for me at all. But other than that, there's really not a whole lot to say about it. As I've said several times before, amazing performance, realistically this huge device with a beautiful screen. It does everything that you can throw at it and more, simply because it is so large, it's so capable with all the performance built into it, tons and tons of RAM, really fast processor, loads of storage space. And the camera. Honestly, most cameras in smartphones nowadays are still not great. This one being capable of 4K video on the rear-facing camera is just amazing. And just to sort of throw it out there, this is actually taken from 4K footage from the rear-facing camera on the Galaxy Note 3. The audio in it, it's a little raw. It's a cell phone camera with a cell phone mic, so you can't expect it to be perfect, but it's got some optical image stabilization. With the studio lights that I'm under, of course, the lighting is pretty optimal, and I think the footage looks pretty good from this camera. Definitely can't complain. And this is footage from the front-facing camera on the Note 3. Doesn't look quite as good as the footage from the rear-facing camera, but it is definitely still good-looking footage. Not the content, but the actual footage itself. The colors are not quite as saturated, but everything looks very clear, not grainy at all, and I'm sure the audio will be exactly the same. I've done some tests with this, and yeah, it's good footage. And what's even more than all that, I even tested out some of the low light capabilities. Low light on this, not so great, but when you couple it with the HDR mode that comes into the camera, you can actually get some halfway decent shots with the right setup. I was at one of my son's soccer matches, his practices actually, they had later in the evening, and captured this HDR shot, which I was very impressed with. So yeah, I'm not going to blather on any more about it. Realistically speaking, if you're looking for a device and you're looking for one that is just ridiculously large, this is where you want to be right now. You're sort of in the two different categories of people. You got the people that want a smartphone, then you get the people that want a smartphone that's the size of a handbag. Yeah. There are a few of these on the market. You've got, of course, the Galaxy Note series, you've got the Oppos, you've got the Sony Xperia Z Ultra stuff, HTC One Max, and honestly, I haven't gotten my hands on many of those other ones. The Oppo N1 is an amazing phone, but actually I don't think it's available yet in the States, and I would hesitate to say that this is probably just as good, if not a little better, simply because of the camera. But at the same time, feel free to try out all the ones out there and see which one you like the best, see which one you want before you make your decisions. This is definitely an amazing choice. If you do end up choosing this, you're probably going to be pretty happy with it, presuming that you like Samsung's TouchWiz interface on top of it. But if you don't, you can always root it and put a custom ROM on top of it, put a custom skin on top of it, whatever else you want to do. I will say I'm definitely going to be a little bit displeased having to send this back, but not too much so, because my pocket will be a little bit happier not having this in there anymore. So yeah, let me know if I've missed out on anything about the Galaxy Note 3. I'm sure I've definitely missed a lot of stuff related to the S Pen, but honestly, I just never found myself using it. It was more of a hindrance to have to kind of fight to get it out and actually use it than to not use it at all. And as far as the rest of the TouchWiz stuff, I've covered most of that in the previous videos about Note devices, at least, where you can multitask using the pull-out application bar on the side, and yeah, it's the same sort of thing. It's just newer, it's slightly more updated. It's an amazing device. It's a ridiculously expensive device, but it is an amazing device. So if you can afford it and it sounds like it's good for you, go ahead and give it a shot. Run to a Verizon store and see if you can get your hands on it in the store, or maybe see if a friend has one before picking it up, simply because it's a really large device. And I will say though, when I went from this back to my device of choice, it felt tiny by comparison, and I had a few days where I actually had to readjust to using my device because this spoiled me. My first impression of this was, holy crap, it's huge. And by the end of it, it was the norm. After just 2 or 3 days, this is the normal phone. So maybe give it a little time before you completely blow it off, because it is gigantic. But yeah, I think that's going to be about all from me for today. I've talked an awful lot about this, and I really didn't intend for it to be this big. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll try to come back at you with another Linux news video as soon as possible, but things going on, lots of videos being made. Thanks again so much for watching, and I will see you again very soon. Bye guys.